Canadians are feeling the pinch. Interest rates held steady this past week, but are at a 22-year high. Between that and still high inflation, many of you are struggling. Criticism of the Liberal government in Ottawa is growing over its national housing strategy. Sean Fraser is the new Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Community, and I spoke with him about some of this on Friday. Minister Fraser, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
A pleasure to be with you, as always. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk about, there's obviously lots of components to the housing issues we're seeing across the country, but I first want to ask about the National Housing Strategy timeline. About half the money allocated for it has not been spent and doesn't even seem to have plans to be spent. Why is that strategy not working as it was intended?
So there's a number of different components to the National Housing Strategy, some of which is continued payments to people who are going to take place over a significant period of time. But one of the goals that I have is to get money out the door through existing programs as quickly as we can. We've had some success recently with the Rapid Housing Initiative funding projects more quickly, but we still have in particular low-cost financing opportunities that we're going to be able to identify projects. So we've been working with CMHC to identify a pathway to get the money out as quickly as we possibly can. And I expect in the months ahead, you'll see a changed pace in terms of how quickly we're funding projects that need support of the federal government.
Just so people know, that strategy was created in 2017. So I know you haven't been the minister that long, but do you have a sense at why this has not been more successful? There's like a pool of money sitting there and it's not being used. Has anyone explained that to you?
So this is not a reflection of somebody just sitting on their hands and not administering money. Some of this funding was scheduled to be released over a significant period of time to meet the need over certain years. There are other changes to the financial landscape that has made it difficult, including more recently with increased interest rates, for developers to go ahead with projects that may have worked in a lower interest environment that now make it marginal at best. So we're also looking at other incentives we can put on the table to have those projects that have currently been put on pause move forward with other incentives we can create, which will allow us to unlock further programs, particularly when it comes to low-cost financing for programs through the National Housing Strategy.
Well, what kind of incentives?
There's a range that we're considering right now. Some could include potential tax incentives for builders to build. Some could include other low-cost financing arrangements. But there's a complete set of policies that we need to make sure are in place, including not only the financial incentives to build, but assuring that the workforce is available, ensuring we're building the right kind of homes, and trying to change the landscape so people can build more quickly.
One of the NDP has two ideas on this front. I'm sure you know them. I believe they were both in the report that Mike Moffat presented to you at the cabinet retreat. Remove the federal portion of the GST on the development of affordable homes and set aside federal land to build rental housing. Are those two ideas on the table? Are those things you're willing to consider?
Certainly, those among other ideas are on the table. We want to be very careful about how we design some of these programs because we don't want to be in a position where we create tax incentives that end up subsidizing luxury apartments, for example. But we do want to make sure we're doing everything we can to change the financial equation for builders to build more quickly. When it comes to federal lands, we of course are already moving with some projects that we're trying to identify, but this is a huge opportunity. When we have land that we can unlock, particularly land that is good for housing, that is in communities, that is potentially near transit opportunities, there's a great opportunity for us to consider how we can use that land to build more housing in collaboration with nonprofits in the private sector. And that's an area that I'm keenly looking at making policy changes that will allow us to accelerate that process, which sometimes can take years to unlock.
As you well know, and I'm sure our viewers too, the Bank of Canada maintained interest rates this week at 5%, but there are plenty of Canadians that can't afford their mortgages. They had variable rates; they've gone up. What are your concerns around potential mortgage defaults, and what could the government do or the CMHC do there to step in case things get much more serious?
Look, the interest rate environment has me deeply concerned on a number of different fronts. First and foremost, we got to think about the people that we're trying to help. There's people right now who might own a home that are dealing with a variable rate mortgage who've seen their monthly payments go up. And I'm trying to understand right now the best policies we can do to protect those people so we don't exacerbate a problem with more people in need of homes. We also have people who might potentially lose a home that could then be renovated and offered at a higher price, which further contributes to the problems. But across the system, if we're looking to build more stock at prices that ordinary people can afford, that middle-class families can afford, that low-income families can afford, the reality for a lot of developers is they can no longer make the economics work in a higher interest rate environment. Though I respect completely the independence of the bank, I was pleased to see that they've paused any rate hikes at this particular interval, and I'm hoping that we can continue to fight inflation to bring those, have the bank bring those interest rates down over time to change the landscape to allow builders to build at prices that the middle-class families can afford.
Obviously, you've talked about some of the challenges for getting things built. You know, developers have to know that they're going to make some money off of it. Labor is obviously another concern around it. I'm wondering whether, again, this was something that was recommended in that report to you at Cabinet, whether there needs to be an industrial strategy on housing, whether there needs to be, kind of like after the Second World War, a plan on how to get these things built quickly.
Absolutely there is, and we are working hard to develop opportunities to build that industrial strategy to get homes built more quickly. There's a number of different components, including training Canadians to work in home building at a larger rate than they currently are being trained and currently are working. These are good paying jobs, typically in construction as well, that allow people to put food on the table for their families. But in addition to training the Canadian workforce, we have to look to leverage immigration policies that will more quickly bring in the workers who already have the skills that will allow developers to scale up more broadly. But the key piece to me is that if we rely on stick-built homes by contractors across this country, we won't be able to solve this problem. We need to embrace having homes built in factories. I've been visiting a number of home manufacturers, and the capacity to build at competitive prices in factories is much greater than it's going to be for a custom-built, contractor-built home in a community. Mm-hmm. If we embrace the opportunity to expedite construction, allow it to operate at a scale, and put federal resources into factory expansions, we might actually be able to meet the productive capacity that will allow us to hit the supply we need to render homes more affordable in communities right across the country. So this will be a big part of the path forward.
Again, I realize you just got the job, but you have been in government, and this government has been in place since 2015. It does seem to me that there was a missed opportunity in terms of trying to deal with this problem, and that the federal government, you guys are kind of playing catch up right now. Would you agree that there have been mistakes made in the past about how to move forward?
Yes, I would, but let me be clear where those mistakes were made. These mistakes go back to the late 80s and through the 1990s in particular, when federal governments, and I should acknowledge of both liberal and conservative persuasions, stopped funding housing for decades. That is a big part of why we're in the jam we're in now. The National Housing Strategy, which you raised earlier, was put forward to address the gap, particularly for low-income families. What we've seen is an increase in the number of affordable homes that are being built, but in recent years, the dynamic has changed. Middle-class families are having struggles trying to find homes. Students are having trouble finding homes. Young professionals, sometimes with two people working, can't even find a place to rent and have given up on home ownership. So we need to pivot, recognize the dynamic has changed.
I totally recognize that the federal government got out of the business of housing under a couple of different governments. You're quite right. But the CMHC is saying now we need to build 5.8 million homes by 2030. And it seems to me that the government has had an opportunity to move aggressively forward on this before you were the minister, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah, and just to take us back a couple of years, we decided to start with the National Housing Strategy that was going to build more stock outside of the market, so publicly subsidized social housing for low-income families. What we've really seen over the past couple of years through the pandemic and more recently with the change in the interest rate environments is the equation for builders to build has changed completely. Mm-hmm. The price increases we've seen through the pandemic demands a new urgency from the federal government, and I hope in my time as minister, I'm going to be able to broaden the focus so we're not just subsidizing low-income housing, but are focusing on a strategy that's going to build housing across the spectrum that middle-class families can afford, in addition to continuing to supporting affordable housing for the lowest-income Canadians.
And further measures then, Minister, we could expect those quickly, sometime this fall, potentially?
I am not going to wait months for some grand reveal. When policies are ready, we are going to release them. You should expect to see more from me that's going to help change the financial equation for builders. You should expect more from me to continue to build affordable housing stock for low-income families. And you should expect more from me to demand that provinces and municipalities change the way that they build, in addition to the industrial strategy that we discussed a few minutes ago.
Okay, Minister, I've got that all on tape, so I'll hold you to it, and we'll talk again when you have some things in the works. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
And I'll hold myself to it as well. Thanks so much, Rosemary.
Thank you. Some of the relief the minister talking about there can't come soon enough for Canadians facing those high housing costs, especially seniors on a fixed income. Clive Calloway is a 79-year-old homeowner in BC's interior with a variable mortgage rate, and I spoke to him about some of the hard choices he's been forced to make lately. Clive Calloway joins us now. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to be here.
So tell me how you are coping with these higher interest rates. They didn't increase this past week, so that's probably good news. But how has this affected you?
Well, it's affected us along with the fire issues and the heat issues and everything else.
Tell me how what has changed in your life because the interest rate has increased to 5%?
Oh, I think the key thing is that it's impacted us to not enable us to go to Mexico anymore. We used to love to go on a discount air flight to Mexico or Costa Rica, and that's gone out the window, sadly. And things like that. I mean, that's the real sad part of it all, is cutting back on, I think you guys, we call it, don't we, discretionary income?
Yeah, yep. Has it had...
And that's all gone out...
Yeah. Has it had an impact on your budget, your household budget, in terms of what you can spend on other things because it's such a high interest rate on your credit line now?
Oh, yes. We've had to cut back on even visiting family and friends, coupled with the cost of gas for driving the car and things like that.
Sure.
And Catherine and I, my wife, we were sharing how we're losing out. Even eating out locally, we're down to once a year now. Isn't that crazy?
That is.
And that impacts on local business, which, impacts on us and local business.
Yeah. Would you say that it is worse for people who are retired and have a fixed income?
It is. I read this morning that there's about 1.5 million of us in Canada who still have mortgages. And if any of those are on open rate and not fixed, they can be in trouble.
Do you have, and if some of this is too personal, you just tell me, Clive, but do you have savings that you're able to lean on to sort of make up the difference while you're struggling with these higher interest rates?
Well, sadly, we have savings, but they're locked up in RSP and RRIF, I think they're called. Yeah. And if we pull them out, we forfeit 15% tax on them, a holding tax, and it just messes us up. So we have a little bit of a cushion, and we still have overdraft, which we could increase, but we don't want to do that because of the bank rate.
Yeah. Are there daily things that you would normally be doing? You said going out to eat, but are there other things that you would normally be doing that you can't do?
Oh, yeah, things like movies. And I'm just checking. I wrote a list here just to get a sense of it because I'm 79 now, so the memory isn't quite as sharp as it used to be. Oh, one thing my wife asked me to mention on air is having to cut back on things like massages and physios and even acupuncture, which we as seniors love. And it does a double thing. It makes us feel good and feel better. And we both believe that it helps reduce the impact on the healthcare system. Yeah. So that's a crazy issue.
Is there any danger, Clive, of you and your wife needing to downsize and sell your home? Is that something that you've had a conversation about yet?
Yes. To be honest with you, a realtor's coming in on Monday to see how it might be, and in case we can't cope with the next while. we were dreading the recent announcement, which was they weren't going to increase the Bank of Canada interest rate, but we hear it could come again.
Yeah.
And we're that close. We're right on the edge.
So you would be prepared to sell your house if you had to in order to make it easier to live?
Well, yes. And the sad part is we've set our home up to age in place. We even have a little area ready for future help to come and live in. And one thing that distresses us intellectually and emotionally is the fact that BC government has an aging in place policy. And this Bank of, it's conflicting. We've got one arm of government or federally or institutions such as the Bank of Canada hitting us over here. And then on this side, we've got a policy to help us age in place. So, boy, this conflict is really frustrating.
Do you feel like, I'll wrap it up in a moment here, Clive, but do you feel like you're getting the help you need from the province, from the federal government, anyone? Like, are you being supported and listened to, do you think?
I happen to have some medical issues and I'm being wonderfully helped. And there's a support from the BC IHA, we call it, Interior Health out here. It's been excellent. But on the other side, financially, I haven't found zero help to us. We just hit with this $700 and something a month. I know it's not a big amount. Some people have much bigger mortgages, but for us to pay an extra $700 a month, it takes out our government old age security pension top up. Just wipes it right out.
Right. No, I think $700 is a lot of money for a lot of people. That would make a big difference. What are you hoping then, Clive, that the interest rate stays the same for a little while longer and you can get by?
Well, if it doesn't go any further, we think we can just hold on. Yeah. So this is a safety measure here to bring out a realtor who's a good friend of ours now to see what the situation is and if we need to press the button. What do we do? But I think we can hang in now. If only the feds, somebody would give a grant or some subsidy. What do you call it? A subsidy.
A subsidy, yeah.
Yes, to help cushion it for seniors. That would help.
Okay, Clive. Well, I wish you luck. I certainly hope you don't have to sell the house, but maybe we can stay in touch and see where things go. You're very kind to talk about all these personal things with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I feel like I want to be open to help all of us.
Yeah, that's very kind. Thank you to you and your wife for sharing. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Rosemary. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.